What if I told you that your patience is exactly what is ruining your fishing trip right now? You are out there, freezing your hands, staring at a motionless line, and waiting for a bite that is never going to come. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are tackling a massive problem that ruins early spring fishing for 90% of anglers. You are still using your agonizingly slow winter techniques, but the March fish want a completely different, much faster presentation. I promise you, by the end of this video, you will realize why your live well has been totally empty lately. You are going to discover a hard truth about spring fish behavior that will completely change how you approach the water. But before we get into the heavy details, tell me down in the comments, are you still soaking dead baits and dragging tiny jigs like it is freezing out there? Or have you already sped things up? Let us start an honest debate right now. Understanding this transition is incredibly important, because March is the ultimate trickster month for fishermen. The air might still feel terribly cold, but under the surface, a massive biological shift is happening. For the past 3 or 4 months, you have been conditioned to fish as slowly as humanly possible. You have been told by every old-timer that winter fish are sluggish, so your bait needs to barely move. That is solid advice for January. But fishermen are creatures of habit. We find one thing that works, and we do it over and over again, completely ignoring the changing seasons. We get stuck in a comfort zone of slow drags and long pauses. However, the days are getting longer, and the water is warming up. Sticking to your slow winter habits right now is like driving 20 miles per hour on the highway. You are just going to get run over by the guys who actually know how to adapt. Picture this scenario. You arrive at the lake just as the sun starts to peek over the tall trees. There is a crisp chill in the air, and you can see your breath when you exhale. Frost is still clinging to the grass along the bank. Your brain immediately tells you that it is still deep winter. Because you feel cold, you assume the fish are freezing and sluggish too. So, you tie on a tiny winter jig, make a long cast, and let it sink to the bottom. You start dragging it at a snail pace, waiting for that subtle winter tap. 10 minutes pass, 20 minutes pass. The lake is completely silent, and your line has not moved an inch. You look over at the guy down the bank, and he is reeling in a nice fish. Why? Because you are letting the morning frost fool you. While you are shivering in your heavy jacket, the water temperature has actually been steadily climbing for the last 2 weeks. March is here, and the days are getting noticeably longer. The angle of the sun has changed, and it is warming the shallows differently now. The fish do not care that your hands are freezing. Their biological clocks are ringing like a loud alarm, telling them it is time to wake up and get moving. They are leaving their deep winter holes and pushing aggressively toward the warmer shallows. By sticking to that extremely slow crawling presentation, you are completely ignoring what the fish actually want. You are fishing for the ghosts of January instead of the hungry predators of March. It is a harsh truth, but your slow drag is putting them to sleep. Let us talk about the metabolism shift that happens under the surface. Imagine you are standing on the bank by a shallow, muddy cove. The afternoon sun is beating down on the water, making it look almost like a warm bath. You make a cast with a slow sinking plastic worm, let it hit the bottom, and wait. You wait for 5 minutes, barely twitching your rod tip. You think you are being stealthy, but in reality, you are being incredibly boring. Fish are cold-blooded creatures. During the dark days of winter, their metabolism drops to an absolute crawl, meaning they do not want to chase anything. But now, that warm March sun is heating up the shallow water fast. As the water temperature rises even just 3 or 4 degrees, the metabolism of the fish skyrockets. They go from sluggish zombies to aggressive hunters almost overnight. When they are in this hunting mode, a bait that just sits lifelessly on the bottom does not look like a natural prey item. It looks like a piece of debris. Real prey in warming water is active, darting around and trying to escape. If your lure is not moving with purpose, the fish will swim right past it to find something that looks alive. You have to match their rising energy levels with a faster presentation, or you will be left wondering why the lake seems entirely empty. Breaking the old habits can be the hardest part of spring fishing. You probably remember your grandfather telling you that when the water is cold, you have to fish slow. You picture yourself sitting in a small aluminum boat with him, watching a red and white bobber sit perfectly still on the surface for hours. That advice was gold in January, but clinging to it in March is a massive mistake. The problem is that we get incredibly comfortable in our winter routines. We spend 3 months dragging baits at a microscopic pace, and our brains get hardwired to that specific rhythm. When you step up to the water in early spring, your muscle memory automatically defaults to that sluggish winter drag. You cast out, feel the bottom, and enter a sort of fishing trance, waiting for a gentle tug. But the fish have already flipped the calendar. They are not reading the old fishing manuals that say March is still a slow month. They are reacting to the lengthening days and the increasing sunlight. By stubbornly sticking to the dead-sticking methods of winter, you are entirely out of sync with nature. It is time to respectfully retire those freezing weather tactics and start reeling with some actual authority. If you do not break that winter trance, you are going to get outfished by every angler who knows how to adapt. You need to pay close attention to the baitfish behavior. Think about the last time you walked along a clear rocky shoreline in the early spring. If you looked closely at the shallow water, you probably saw flashes of silver darting quickly around the rocks. The minnows and smaller baitfish are waking up just like the bigger predators. They are no longer suspended in deep, cold water in tight, motionless schools. They are actively moving, searching for warmer water and microscopic food. When a big predator fish sees a school of bait moving quickly, their predatory instincts kick in immediately. Now, compare that natural, speedy movement to your lure. You cast out a heavy jig and slowly drag it across those same rocks. It does not mimic the fast, nervous energy of the real baitfish. It looks totally unnatural. The predator fish are inspecting your bait, realizing it does not match the hatch, and turning away. To trigger a strike, your presentation needs to replicate the panic and speed of a waking ecosystem. Start using lures that flash and move with erratic, quick motions. When your bait darts away quickly, it triggers a chase response. Stop trying to feed them a slow, easy meal when they are naturally looking for a fast-moving target. It is officially time to upgrade your lure profiles and ditch the tiny stuff. All winter long, you have probably been relying on micro jigs, tiny grubs, and hair jigs. Imagine digging through your tackle box on a chilly March morning. Your fingers naturally gravitate toward that tiny black jig that caught you a fish back in December. You tie it on, thinking it is the safe bet. But small baits fished slowly are a defensive mechanism for winter fishing when fish have zero appetite. Now that March is here, the big fish are preparing for the spawning season. They need serious calories to build up their energy reserves. They are not looking for a tiny snack that they have to closely inspect. They want a substantial meal that is worth their effort to chase down. When you throw a tiny, slow-moving bait right now, it simply does not register as a worthwhile meal to a giant fish. You need to tie on larger swim baits, full-size jigs, or bulky spinnerbaits. More importantly, you need to move them fast enough to draw attention from a distance. A big, fast-moving profile creates vibration and moves water, alerting every fish in the area that a massive meal is trying to get away. Put the micro-tackle away until next winter and start throwing baits that command respect. Understanding the power of the reaction strike is the real secret to early spring success. Let us visualize a classic March fishing scenario. You are casting near a massive submerged tree trunk. You know a fish is hiding in those branches. You could throw a plastic worm and let it slowly fall into the wood, hoping the fish is hungry enough to eat it. But what if the fish is not actively feeding at that exact second? If your bait moves slowly, the fish will just watch it sink and do absolutely nothing. This is where speed changes the entire game. Instead of the slow worm, you tie on a brightly colored crankbait. You cast it past the tree and reel it in aggressively, crashing the lure directly into the thick wooden branches. The bait deflects wildly off the wood, darting erratically into the face of the hidden fish. The fish does not have time to think. It does not have time to inspect the lure or decide if it is hungry. Pure, aggressive instinct takes over, and it crushes the bait simply because it invaded its territory and tried to escape fast. That is a reaction strike. By speeding up your presentation and forcing the issue, you are catching fish that were never planning to eat in the first place. You are bypassing their stomach and targeting their aggression. You need to fundamentally change your retrieve speed from a slow drag to an aggressive hop. Think about how you hold your rod during the winter. You cast out, keep the rod tip low, and slowly sweep it to the side, feeling every single pebble on the bottom. It is a slow, methodical crawl. Now imagine doing that in warming March water. A big fish swims up behind your crawling bait, follows it for 10 feet, gets bored by the lack of action, and swims away. You never even knew it was there. To fix this, you must change your rod action. Instead of dragging, start snapping the rod tip. If you are using a jig or a Texas-rigged plastic, let it hit the bottom, and then give the rod 2 sharp, fast pops upward. Make that bait jump aggressively off the bottom like a frightened crawfish fleeing for its life. Then, let it fall quickly on slackline. The strike almost always happens on that fast fall. This sudden burst of speed followed by a quick drop drives springfish completely crazy. It creates a visual disturbance and sends a strong vibration through the water column. You are no longer politely offering them food. You are demanding their attention with speed and erratic movement. Break the dragging habit today. Water clarity and spring winds play a massive role in why you need to speed up. March is notoriously windy. Imagine standing on a muddy bank with the wind blowing 20 miles per hour straight into your face. The waves are crashing, and the water near the shore has turned the color of chocolate milk. If you try to fish slowly in these conditions, you are doomed. A slow-moving, subtle bait makes very little noise and displaces almost no water. In that muddy, churning environment, the fish literally cannot find your slow bait. They rely on their lateral lines to feel vibrations when they cannot see. This is exactly why you must speed up and get aggressive. You need to tie on a lure with a large blade, like a heavy spinnerbait or a vibrating jig, and reel it fast enough to create a serious thump underwater. The faster you move it, the more vibration it sends out into the murky water. You cast right into the wind, keep your rod tip high, and burn that bait back to you. The fish will feel that heavy vibration coming from a distance, track it through the muddy water, and violently intercept it. If you fish slow in dirty spring water, you are basically fishing invisible lures. Deflecting crankbaits off hard cover is a fast presentation that catches giants in March. Picture a long stretch of rocky shoreline that drops off into deeper water. During the winter, you might slowly hop a small jig down those rocks, taking 5 minutes per cast. But as the water warms, those rocks hold heat, and aggressive fish pull up shallow to hunt. You grab a medium diving crankbait and make a long cast parallel to the rocky bank. Instead of a slow, steady retrieve, you start reeling quickly, intentionally, driving the lip of the crankbait straight into the rocks. You feel the bait grinding, bouncing, and deflecting wildly off the hard surface. Every time the bait hits a rock and kicks out to the side, it mimics a dying or fleeing baitfish making a sudden move. That fast deflection is the exact trigger for a massive strike. The fish are sitting in the crevices between the rocks, waiting for an ambush opportunity. When that lure goes flying past them, bouncing erratically at high speed, they absolutely destroy it. You cannot achieve this erratic action by reeling slowly. You have to commit to a fast, aggressive retrieve and not be afraid to bump into things. It is noisy, it is fast, and it works perfectly. Chasing temperature gradients is a crucial strategy that requires a fast approach. Imagine you are in a boat, staring at your fish finder. The main lake water temperature says it is 48 degrees. It feels cold. But you decide to move your boat to the very back of a shallow creek channel that is protected from the cold wind. You look at your screen again, and the water temperature back here is 54 degrees. That is a massive difference. In this warmer pocket, the fish are incredibly active. If you pull up to this warm spot and start fishing with your slow winter crawl, you are wasting a golden opportunity. These fish are warmed up and ready to chase. You need to grab a fast-moving bait, like a square-bill crankbait or a chatterbait, and cover the entire warm area as quickly as possible. Make rapid casts to every piece of wood, every grass patch, and every dock piling. Do not linger in one spot too long. You are hunting for the most aggressive fish in that specific warm zone. By fishing fast, you can effectively present your bait to 50 different fish in the time it would take a slow angler to present their bait to 5. Find the warmest water, speed up your casts, and maximize your chances. Overcoming the fear of reeling too fast is a mental barrier many older anglers struggle with. You are standing on the front deck, holding a shiny new jerkbait. You cast it out, and your instinct tells you to twitch it once, then let it sit perfectly still for 20 long seconds. That long pause is classic winter advice, but today, the sun is shining brightly. You decide to try something crazy. You start twitching the rod rapidly, jerking the bait side to side with almost zero pause in between. Your brain is screaming that you are moving too fast, that no fish will be able to catch it. You feel like you are doing it wrong because it goes against everything you have been taught. Suddenly, the rod is nearly yanked out of your hands by a massive strike. The fish did not just catch it. They completely swallowed it. That is the moment you realize that fish are incredibly fast creatures. Even in cool water, a motivated fish can swim faster than you could ever possibly reel. You are not going to outrun them. In fact, reeling too fast is rarely the problem in March. The real problem is giving them too much time to inspect the bait and realize it is a fake piece of plastic. Stop worrying about outrunning them and start making them chase. Aggressive jigging techniques are your best friend when moving away from the winter crawl. Let us imagine a deep, rocky point that transitions into a shallow flat. During January, you would slowly drag a heavy football jig across those deep rocks. But now, it is March. The fish are moving up that point toward the shallow flat to feed. You cast a lighter, more streamlined jig right onto the edge of the flat. Instead of dragging, you let it sink, point your rod tip down, and aggressively snap the rod upward. The jig rockets off the bottom, darting 3 feet into the water column before fluttering back down. You reel up the slack quickly and snap it again. This aggressive hopping technique completely changes the visual profile of the lure. It no longer looks like a dormant bug. It looks like a panicked crawfish trying to escape an incoming predator. The aggressive upward snap catches the attention of fish cruising the flat, and the quick fluttering fall triggers their instinct to strike before the meal gets away. If you only slowly drag your jigs this time of year, you are blending in with the bottom debris. You need to snap that jig aggressively to stand out and force the fish to react instantly. Ripping lipless crankbaits through new spring grass is a wildly fast and effective tactic. Picture a large, shallow bay where the very first patches of green underwater grass are just starting to grow. This new vegetation produces oxygen and attracts baitfish, which in turn attracts the big predators. You cast a heavy, vibrating, lipless crankbait right into the middle of that emerging grass. As you reel it in quickly, you feel the lure hit a thick patch of weeds. A winter angler would stop reeling, gently shake the rod, and slowly try to pull it free. That is a mistake. Instead, when you feel that grass grab your lure, you need to violently rip the rod tip backward. You tear the lure forcefully out of the vegetation. As the lure rips free, it violently accelerates and vibrates like crazy, shedding pieces of green grass. The fish that was hiding in that grass patch sees this sudden burst of frantic speed and strikes it out of pure aggressive reflex. That ripping motion is the ultimate speed trigger. You are intentionally getting stuck just so you can snatch it away at high speed. You cannot execute this deadly technique if you are stuck in a slow, timid mindset. The unexpected early topwater bite is the ultimate proof that speed works in March. It sounds crazy to most guys. You are at the lake on a surprisingly warm afternoon. The air temperature has hit 70 degrees for 3 days in a row. The guy next to you is stubbornly fishing a slow worm on the bottom, but you know the surface water is warming rapidly. You tie on a fast-moving buzzbait. You cast it over a shallow point and immediately start reeling fast, keeping the blade churning loudly across the surface. It seems way too early in the year for this. The water is churning, the bait is squeaking loudly, and you are retrieving it at a high rate of speed. Suddenly the water erupts. A huge fish completely destroys the bait on the surface. The guy next to you drops his jaw in pure shock. Why did it work? Because that warm surface layer acts like a blanket, pulling aggressive fish upward. A fast, noisy topwater bait creates chaos that a fired-up spring fish simply cannot ignore. It proves that when the conditions align, speed and aggression will beat slow and subtle every single time. Do not let the calendar dictate your tactics when the weather is telling you to fish fast. Reading following fish is a visual cue that you need to speed up immediately. Imagine standing high up on a clear water bank, wearing your polarized sunglasses. You cast a swim bait out and start a moderate, steady retrieve. As the bait gets about 10 feet from the shore, you see a dark shadow materialize behind it. It is a big fish. It is following your lure perfectly, tracking it with interest, but it is not opening its mouth. As the bait reaches the bank, the fish casually turns around and swims back into the depths. This scenario breaks the heart of many anglers, and their first instinct is to cast back out and fish even slower, hoping to give the fish more time. That is exactly the wrong move. If a fish follows your bait but does not strike, it means they are interested, but they have too much time to inspect it. They realize it is not real. The very next cast, you need to throw the same lure, but retrieve it significantly faster, adding erratic jerks and sudden speed bursts. When that same fish sees the bait again, it thinks its prey has spotted it and is trying to flee in a panic. The sudden increase in speed removes the inspection time and forces the fish to commit. Speed is the ultimate cure for followers. Targeting the transition zones requires a fast search bait mentality. Think about the geography of your local lake. The fish have their deep wintering holes, and they have the shallow bays where they will eventually spawn. Right now, in March, they are constantly moving back and forth between these two areas, staging on secondary points, drop-offs, and creek channel swings. These are the transition zones. If you park your boat over a drop-off and slowly drag a plastic worm all morning, you might catch 1 or 2 fish that happen to slowly swim by. But transition fish are nomadic right now. They are grouped up, and they are constantly on the move. To intercept them, you must use a fast search bait to cover a massive amount of water. You grab a medium diving crankbait or a heavy spinnerbait and make long, rapid casts across the point, fanning out your angles. You reel quickly, constantly feeling the bottom contour. Once you get a strike, you know you have intercepted the moving school. You can then slow down slightly to catch a few more. But the initial location of these moving fish absolutely requires you to fish fast and cover maximum acreage. Slow fishing in transition zones is just a recipe for missing the school entirely. Fishing the wind-blown banks aggressively is a prime example of why speed is necessary. Let us say you arrive at the lake, and a strong, harsh wind is howling from the north. It is pushing massive waves violently against the southern rocky shoreline. Many guys will avoid that bank because boat control is difficult and casting is tough. But you know that the wind is pushing microscopic food against those rocks, which draws massive schools of baitfish, which in turn draws the biggest, hungriest predators in the lake. This is a chaotic, noisy, and fast-paced environment. If you cast a slow finesse bait into those crashing waves, it will be tossed around uselessly and completely ignored. Instead, you position yourself right in the rough water, tie on an aggressive jerkbait, and cast straight into the wind. You rip the rod tip violently, making the bait dart erratically through the turbulent water. You pause it for only 1 second before ripping it again. The fish in those waves are feeding aggressively, relying on quick reactions in the chaotic water. By matching the violence of the environment with a fast, erratic retrieve, you will hook into the most actively feeding fish on the entire lake. The danger of pausing too long is a habit that ruins countless hookups in early spring. Imagine you are working a suspending jerkbait. You have been told that in cold water, you need to let the bait sit still for 10 or even 15 seconds between twitches. You cast it out, give it 2 quick snaps, and then you just let it sit there. You stare at your slack line, counting silently in your head. Meanwhile, underwater, an aggressive springfish has rushed up to your lure after the first twitch. It is fired up and ready to eat. But then, your bait stops completely dead. The fish stares at it. 5 seconds pass. The fish starts to lose interest. 10 seconds pass. The fish realizes this piece of plastic is not a fleeing minnow, turns its tail, and vanishes. You finally twitch the rod again, but you are twitching it for nobody. The fish is gone. While a long pause is vital in 30-degree water, March water is warmer, and the fish have a much shorter attention span. They want a chase. Cut your pauses down to 1 or 2 seconds maximum. Keep that bait darting and moving. If you pause too long, you are literally giving the fish enough time to talk themselves out of biting. Adapting to the afternoon warming trend is when the fast presentation truly shines. Think about how a typical March day progresses. The morning is freezing cold, and the water is slightly chilled from the night air. Maybe a slightly slower presentation got you 1 bite at dawn, but as the clock hits 2 in the afternoon, the bright sun has been baking the shallow mudflats for hours. The water temperature on those flats has spiked dramatically. You cannot keep fishing the same slow way you did at dawn. You move your boat to the shallowest, muddiest flat you can find. You tie on a heavy chatterbait with a bright trailer. You make a long cast into 12 inches of water and immediately start burning it back to the boat, keeping the rod tip high so it does not drag in the mud. The blade is vibrating frantically, leaving a wake on the surface. Suddenly, a massive wake pushes out from behind a submerged stump, tracking your bait at incredible speed, and absolutely crushes it. That fish was up there specifically to soak in the heat and hunt aggressively. If you had thrown a slow finesse bait in that warm, shallow water, the fish would have completely ignored it. You adapted to the afternoon heat by fishing fast, and it paid off immediately. Let us put all of these pieces together for your next trip to the lake. Picture yourself packing your gear into the truck the night before. Instead of grabbing the tiny hooks, the ultralight line, and the slow finesse baits, you are loading up on medium-heavy rods, bright crankbaits, and aggressive jigs. You arrive at the boat ramp the next morning, but this time you have a completely different mindset. You are not going to sit in one spot for an hour, hoping a fish swims by and decides to gently nibble on your motionless plastic worm. Instead, you drop the trolling motor and you start covering water. You are casting to a laydown, giving your lure 3 quick hops, and immediately reeling it in to cast again. You move down the bank, hunting for the active fish, relying on reaction strikes and speed. It might feel strange at first. You might feel like you are rushing the process. But then, you feel that violent rod-jerking strike that nearly rips the handle out of your grip. That is the moment everything clicks into place. That is the moment you realize the long, cold winter is finally over. you have successfully adapted to the spring transition. By ditching the slow crawl and embracing a faster presentation, you are putting yourself in the best possible position to catch the biggest fish. To sum it all up, March means speed. It is time to officially stop the agonizingly slow winter crawl and start matching the rising energy levels of the fish. We talked about how the warming water spikes their metabolism, how baitfish become much more active, and why heavy vibration and fast deflections trigger violent reaction strikes. The biggest twist here is realizing that by fishing faster, you are not missing fish. You are actually covering more water, finding the aggressive biters, and forcing them to react on pure instinct rather than hunger. Speeding up changes everything because it stops giving the fish time to overthink your lure. Thank you so much for watching. If this video helped you realize why you need to speed up your spring fishing, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like to support the channel. It means a lot to us. Now I want to hear from you. Head down to the comments and tell me, what is your absolute favorite fast-moving lure to throw when the early spring warm-up hits? Let us get a great discussion going, and I will see you on the water in the next video.